Hi, it's Ellie. You found the Hidden Grove, and I am going to be doing the Tarot Origin Story tag by Joniki at Catamancy Tarot. I thought it would be a good way to introduce myself formally on this channel. I feel like I haven't really done that yet since I started my channel, so I thought this was a great way to do that. This tag, I think, was originally part of Joniki's research. She is a PhD candidate in anthropology, and she studies tarot and its uses and divination in the US and in India. And I think that's super cool. I myself studied anthropology in college. I got my master's degree in archaeology, which is a different type of anthropology than Joniki does. She does sociocultural, but I think it's so interesting, and I love that there are other people in the tarot tube sphere that have that interest. So I am very excited to do this tag, and I think it's very interesting. And I've been watching other people's tags, and I think it's so cool how the different ways people come to learning tarot. So yeah, here we go. I have my answers written down here, so pardon me if I pause to take a look at what I have written. So the first question is, what kind of religious upbringing did you have? And I grew up Jewish. My parents were very religious. We were actually part of a Orthodox religious community called Chabad, which is, yeah, it's a Jewish religious community. But my parents were also very spiritual and interested heavily in Jewish mysticism, also known as Kabbalah. And I grew up with a lot of that Kabbalistic rhetoric and teachings. My dad used to very heavily study Kabbalah and still does, but yeah, so I am very familiar with it, and I grew up with that in my life. And my mother, also very interested in Jewish mysticism and spirituality, had her own tarot decks and has, I think, had hers since she was in college, but she used to take clients, and in our home she would take clients. She was actually also a Reiki healer, so that's energy healing, and she would take clients in our home and do energy healing on them, and all part of this, I think, greater spiritual connection that she believed in and she had, and that our family connected to. So yeah, that was my religious upbringing, and that leads pretty well into the next question. I'm gonna have some decks out too, so you're not just looking at my hands. But my next question was, what was your first exposure to tarot? And I chose the Rider-Waite-Smith to show you guys just because this was one of the decks that my mom has, and I loved looking at this deck. I loved playing around with it. I would put all the cards back in order and then mix them around and look at the characters in the deck and try to think of what their stories were, how they got to these points that they were at in the cards, and I would make up stories about them and lay them all out in front of me, and I just had a lot of fun playing with her decks. She had an RWS deck, she still has in her RWS deck the Goddess Tarot and the Voyager Tarot. And now, recently, I gifted her a copy of Tarot of the Cat People because I thought it was just very her. So she has 4 decks now. And yeah, I'm very familiar with these images because they were such a part of my childhood and a part of my playtime when I would play with my mom. So yeah, RWS, I think these images were my first exposure to tarot. And I wasn't really interested in using them myself for reading for a long time because I think in my head I just associated them with play, and because I used to just play around with them and make believe, because I would make up stories about the people. It was part of I guess my playtime. So I, for a long time, never actually read with tarot until I started my 20s. And then I bought my first tarot deck for myself kind of on a whim. It was actually in a Barnes & Noble and it was the Star Spinner Tarot. And I was just so intrigued by this deck. I saw it on the shelf, and I had never been interested in like buying a tarot deck for myself. But then I saw this deck, and I just thought, wow, this is this is a tarot deck people make. Like, I never really realized that it could be so mystical and childlike and fantasy oriented. And again, I think in my head I had this association of tarot with like playtime and with childhood, so this was kind of like that for me, like, oh, this brings me back to my childhood when I was so interested in my mom's tarot decks and the stuff she would do with it. So this was the first deck I bought for myself, and I didn't really use it that much. I more just like looked at it and played around with it for the art, because that was my experience with tarot, and I just enjoyed it so much. I would flip through this for for hours and just look at the different art pieces and read through the book. And I found some online videos about the different fantasy stories, the different stories that are used in this deck and are represented in this deck. And I can't remember who made that video now, but I'll link it in the description so you can see if you have this deck and are interested. I just thought that was so cool. And yeah, so this was the first deck I bought for myself. And I hadn't, at that point buying this deck, I hadn't even really started reading tarot. It was just kind of a nostalgic experience for me. And let me see. And then the next question, which is the next step of my journey, is when did tarot become a more important part of your practice, and when did you start being a skeptic? I don't know if I was ever truly like a skeptic, because I don't think the way I see tarot even now is one that warrants much skepticism. More because the way I see tarot is just a series of archetypes in your life, that in everyone's life, that we can connect to our own lives. Everyone has experienced heartbreak and hope and fear and loss, and those things are all mapped out in the tarot. So I think it's a great tool of reflection, a tool for journaling. Sometimes, you know, you do get those divinatory moments where a reading you have doesn't make sense until something in your life happens and you go, oh my goodness, that's what that was from. But still, I think that I greatly use tarot today as a reflective practice, and also as a way to dive deeper into my spirituality in terms of like Jewish mysticism and Kabbalistic practice. And yeah, and for that practice, I love the Thoth Tarot. But that didn't answer the question. I'm sorry. The question was, when did tarot become a more important part of your practice? I think tarot became a really important part of my practice during the pandemic in 2020, 2021, because such a great part of my spiritual practice and the way I interacted with the world was through community, and also through nature and being outside and doing things with the community. And I really lost that during the pandemic, and I think I needed to find some sort of personal practice that I could do independently and I could do on my own that was interesting and also stimulating to the brain, because I guess I was feeling a lot of boredom. And that's when I started also collecting decks, because just the different artwork and relating them to the meetings, oh my gosh, it was so stimulating and so exciting, and just kind of relieved that feeling of boredom. I think that I hear a similar story a lot on TarotTube, is that people got really into reading and collecting during the pandemic, and I do think it was really impactful in terms of trying to find a practice for yourself that was intellectually and spiritually stimulating, like the tarot. And I especially fell in love with the Thoth Tarot just because I was so easily able to map my knowledge of Kabbalah and the Tree of Life and things I had known growing up onto this tarot deck, and astrology too. So that was really great. And let's see what else. And when did you start to read for others / clients, and why? So reading for others, I've never read for clients. I've never read tarot for money, but pretty much as soon as I started using tarot in a more deeper way than just looking at the pretty images, as soon as I started studying it, I started reading for people. And that for me was a way to practice the meanings of the cards. For instance, in my little bubble of people that I saw during the pandemic, I would practice reading on all of them, starting off with my roommates and then my boyfriend, now fiance, reading for him, and my family when I got to visit them. But yeah, I think it was always part of my learning process, was setting up cards and using them in a reading for other people. I think it was easier to read for other people than for myself, because I know so much about myself, obviously, but I was very quick to associate the messages in the cards with events in my life, and I felt like I wanted a more objective approach to reading, just to start out and to learn. So reading for others was really the key to that. And no, I've never read for money, and I've never had clients. I've considered it, but I don't think that would be the path for me. I'm not sure. It just, for me, it feels strange to take something that feels so spiritual, and I don't know, I guess I don't feel like I would feel comfortable with charging money for readings. But that's personal, and I greatly admire tarot readers who are able to put themselves out there. I think it's really brave, and I admire that a lot. Let's see. What are qualities from your background that make you a good reader, and what do you bring to the table, and what is your tarot superpower? So I guess, like I said, I talked a lot about Kabbalah and my background growing up Jewish, so I think that something that does make it a little easier for me to read these hermetic sort of decks is my background with Kabbalah. It feels familiar to me, and it feels like once I really dive into it, I'm like, oh, I get excited. I get excited to connect it to other things that I know and connect it to things that are familiar to me. And I mean, Hermeticism isn't an easy thing to read about, and Kabbalah isn't an easy thing to read about. So I'm not saying that it's easy for me, but I think it is more exciting for me just because of my background knowledge, and because I can take things that I remember from my past and say, oh, that connects to this, that's so cool, that's what that means. Or, just have that extra level of interest. And another thing is that I can read and speak a bit of Hebrew, so translating these words is fun. And I was excited to find out that the major arcana all are associated with Hebrew letters, and that was a cool extra bit of learning that I was excited for. But yeah, like oh, here's something cool. Sorry, next to my bookshelf, but something that a gift that my dad recently got me was this book of formation. It's a English translation of the Sefer Yetzirah, which is the book of formation or the book of creation. This is like the book of Jewish mysticism, and a lot of Kabbalah and Kabbalah teachings and commentary are based off of this book. It's a lot smaller than people think it is, and a lot of this is the introduction. The Sefer Yetzirah is only this big. It's a pretty short text, but the commentary and the depth of the text is so great that it turns into books that look like this, right? This is another Sefer Yetzirah, but it's all commentary, and it becomes this from this. But something cool I wanted to just show you guys that this translation actually has an introduction by A.E. Waite, Arthur Edward Waite, the co-creator of the RWS tarot, which was so cool. I guess I never really like noticed that until recently, but this translation that was a gift to me, but this translation has an introduction by him, so that's a cool thing. If anyone wants to explore, I recommend this book. Anyway, okay, where were we? This is a very rambly video, I'm sorry. Okay, and then the last question is, when did you get into TarotTube, and what is your relationship to tarot and social media? So I got into TarotTube also during the pandemic. I think I was, like I said, I kind of lost that community feeling in my life, and I also was away from my family during the pandemic. I was living in New Orleans and my family is in Los Angeles, so I felt that real distance between them, and TarotTube was a great community. It was so kind and brought me a sense of familiarity, because like with the tarot images felt so familiar to me and felt so comforting. So watching TarotTube videos was really special to me, and I enjoyed it a lot during the pandemic and still enjoy it now, and now have a channel, so that's exciting. And then the last bit is about social media. So my social media is YouTube. I also have Facebook, but I rarely use it. I mostly use Facebook actually to make tarot trades, decks that I want to trade or sell, and I use Facebook to connect with some family members, but those are my only two social medias that I use. I considered getting Instagram for a while, because I would notice that people on YouTube would say, oh, I'm doing this on my Instagram, and I'm like posting daily draws or like deck combinations or things like this, or information I'm learning, and I thought that sounded really cool, but I decided against it because I think that Instagram, I think it would have been kind of a detriment to me. I'm not good with like excess amounts of information in the social media sense. Feels like a lot of pressure. It feels very overwhelming to me. So I'm good with YouTube. I even have to take breaks from that sometimes. And I have an email. So that's a great way if anyone needs to contact me. Email is great. And let me think. Yeah, that is all. This was a cool video to make, and if anyone has any similar experiences with tarot or wants to comment or start a conversation about the way they read tarot, how they like to study tarot, their experience with Kabbalah, I would love to hear all of that. So please let me know. And yeah, okay, bye-bye.